The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the curtains as Mei Lin sat at her bedroom desk, math textbook open but forgotten. Her fingers tapped rhythmically on the wooden surface, unconsciously playing an invisible piano. Outside, the wind rustled through autumn leaves, creating a melody that only she seemed to hear. Mei had always been like this, finding music in the ordinary, turning everyday sounds into symphonies in her head. A knock on her door broke her concentration. "Mei? Are you practicing?" Her mother's voice carried that familiar tone of expectation. Mei sighed, closing her textbook. "I was about to start," she lied, glancing at the piano in the corner of her room. The black and white keys seemed to watch her accusingly. Her mother opened the door and stepped inside. Still wearing her work clothes, a neat blazer and pencil skirt that matched her role as a respected university professor, Dr. Lin was known for her brilliance in biochemistry and her even more famous perfectionism. "The holiday party is this Saturday," her mother said, straightening some sheet music that was already perfectly aligned on Mei's desk. "Dean Wu specifically asked if you would play something." Mei's stomach dropped. "Mom, you didn't tell him I would, did you?" The look on her mother's face answered before her words did. "Of course I did. It's a wonderful opportunity. Half the faculty will be there." "That's exactly the problem," Mei muttered, twisting a strand of her long dark hair nervously. "I don't want to play in front of all your colleagues." At 16, Mei had been taking piano lessons for 12 years, more than 3/4 of her life. She could read music as easily as words and could play pieces that impressed her teachers and won competitions. But performing in front of strangers, that was entirely different. "You play beautifully," her mother said, softening a little. "Why keep your talent hidden? Besides, it will look good on your college applications. Performed for the Dean of Sciences and university faculty." She smiled as if she just solved all of Mei's problems. Mei bit her lip. College applications. Everything these days seemed to circle back to that, the looming future that felt both too far away and coming too quickly. "What would I even play?" Mei asked, already sensing she was fighting a losing battle. Her mother brightened, recognizing surrender. "Something impressive but not too showy. Chopin, perhaps, or that Beethoven sonata you've been working on." "The Beethoven isn't ready," Mei said quickly. The thought of playing an unpolished piece made her palms sweat. "Well, figure it out by Saturday. And wear that blue dress, the one with the silver trim." Her mother checked her watch. "Dinner in 30 minutes. And please get some practice in before then." After her mother left, Mei reluctantly moved to the piano bench. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, feeling their smooth, cool surface. The piano had been her companion for as long as she could remember. She didn't hate playing, quite the opposite. When she was alone, she could lose herself for hours, experimenting with melodies and letting the music wash over her. It was the watching eyes, the judging ears that she couldn't stand. Mei pressed a key, letting a single note hang in the air. Then another. Soon she was playing a simple melody from memory, something she'd composed herself on a rainy day last spring. It wasn't the kind of music that would impress anyone at the party. No complicated runs or dramatic crescendos. But it was hers. Mei. "I don't hear Chopin," her mother called from downstairs. With a deep breath, Mei switched to Nocturne in E-flat major. Her fingers knew the piece well. Too well, perhaps. She could play it on autopilot, which left her mind free to worry about Saturday. The dean's holiday party was legendary in university circles. It was held in his sprawling historic home at the edge of campus, a place rumored to have once housed a state governor. Faculty members brought their families. Graduate students nervously networked over punch, and somehow, Mei was now expected to provide entertainment. As she played, she imagined all the ways things could go wrong. She could forget the notes. Her hands could freeze up. Someone could talk loudly during a quiet passage. Or worse, no one would talk and everyone would just stare at her, waiting for her to make a mistake. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself, hitting a wrong note as her concentration broke. She started again from the beginning, trying to focus only on the music. Her phone buzzed with a text. Grateful for the interruption, Mei grabbed it. It was from her best friend Zoe, survived Chen's pop quiz. Barely. "You coming to study group tomorrow?" Mei typed back quickly, "Can't. Mom's making me practice for some party." The reply came almost instantly. "Piano prison strikes again. Want me to call with a fake emergency Saturday?" Mei smiled despite herself. Zoe had been offering emergency escape plans since 5th grade, when May's mother had first started showcasing her daughter's musical talents at university functions. I wish. Mom would see right through it. Besides, the dean himself asked for me. Zoe's response was a series of horrified emojis followed by, play something terrible. Chopsticks, maybe? May laughed out loud at the thought of playing the simple childhood tune for the distinguished professors and their families. Yeah, that would go over well. Mom would disown me. At least you'd be free from piano prison. May, dinner. Her mother's voice interrupted her momentary lightness. Gotta go. Prison warden calling. At dinner, her father tried to ease her anxiety. Unlike her mother, who viewed every performance as a stepping stone to success, May's father understood her stage fright. Just look at the piano, not the people, he suggested, passing her a bowl of rice. That's what I do when I give lectures to undergrads. I look at the blackboard, not all those sleepy faces. That's different, Dad, May said. No one judges you if you play a wrong note on the blackboard. You'd be surprised, he chuckled. Last week I made a calculation error and a freshman actually raised his hand to correct me. May's mother shook her head. This isn't helping, Hui. May doesn't need to worry about mistakes because she won't make any if she practices enough. She turned to May. 4 hours of practice tomorrow after school, minimum. I'll call Mrs. Wang and cancel your lesson this week so you can focus on preparing. Cancel my lesson? But Mrs. Wang might have advice for performing. You don't need advice, you need practice, her mother said firmly. Mrs. Wang lets you experiment too much anyway. All those modern pieces are distracting you from mastering the classics. May fell silent. Mrs. Wang was the one teacher who encouraged her to play contemporary music alongside Bach and Mozart. In their lessons, May often brought in pop songs she wanted to learn, and Mrs. Wang helped her work out how to play them by ear. Those were the moments when piano felt like fun rather than obligation. That night, May couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at her ceiling, where glow-in-the-dark stars had been stuck in constellations since she was 8. The piano loomed in the shadows of her room, both a comfort and a source of anxiety. She reached for her headphones and pulled up a playlist of piano music. Not classical, but modern pianists who blended styles and broke rules. As the gentle melodies filled her ears, she imagined herself playing not for judgment but for joy. What would that be like? To sit at a piano and simply share something beautiful without worrying about perfection? The next day at school, May was distracted. In chemistry lab, she nearly mixed the wrong solutions, earning a concerned look from her teacher. Everything okay, May? Ms. Rivera asked. You're usually my most careful student. Sorry, May mumbled. Just thinking about something. A something that has you looking like you're facing a firing squad. Ms. Rivera smiled kindly. Want to talk about it? May hesitated, then found herself explaining about the dean's party. Ms. Rivera nodded understanding. I used to dance ballet, she shared unexpectedly. Performances terrified me. I would literally be sick before going on stage. What did you do? May asked, surprised to find this common ground with her confident teacher. I found my own reason for dancing. Not for the audience or my teachers, but for myself. She checked the solution May was working with. Try thinking about why you play piano in the first place. Not why your mother wants you to play, but why you sit down at those keys when no one's watching. The question followed May home, lingering as she sat down for her 4 hours of enforced practice. Why did she play? When had it stopped being her choice? As her fingers moved through scales and arpeggios warming up, May tried to remember. There had been a time, hadn't there? Before recitals and competitions. Before college applications and impressing faculty. A time when she had begged for lessons, not avoided them. She closed her eyes, letting her hands find their own path across the keys. A melody emerged, tentative at first, then gaining confidence. It wasn't Chopin or Beethoven or any composer she'd studied. It was just hers. For a moment, she forgot about Saturday, forgot about the dean and his party, forgot about her mother's expectations, and in that forgetting, she found something she hadn't felt in a long time when sitting at this bench. Peace. Of course, it didn't last. The front door opened, announcing her mother's return from campus. May quickly switched to Chopin, the notes precise but somehow hollow now. Saturday was coming. Ready or not, and May Lin would have to play. Saturday arrived with a cold, clear sky, and May's nerves stretched thin as piano wire. She had barely slept. her dreams filled with endless keyboards and faceless audiences. Now, standing in front of her bedroom mirror, she tugged at the blue dress her mother had insisted on, the one with the silver trim that made her look like a serious musician. "May, are you ready?" Her mother's voice carried up the stairs. "We need to leave in 20 minutes. May stared at her reflection. The girl looking back seemed like a stranger. Hair neatly pinned, dress formal and stiff, eyes wide with dread. She looked exactly like what her mother wanted, the perfect daughter to show off to university colleagues. Someone who would reflect well on the Lin family name. "Coming," she called back, her voice small. In her hands, she clutched the folder containing her sheet music, though she didn't really need it. She had played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major so many times this week that the notes seemed tattooed on the inside of her eyelids. Her fingers moved in her lap, playing invisible keys, a nervous habit she couldn't control. Downstairs, her father adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. He caught May's eye as she descended and gave her an encouraging smile. "You look wonderful," he said. "Very professional." Her mother emerged from the kitchen, already wearing her coat. "Good, you're ready. Did you practice this morning?" "Yes," May lied. She had sat at the piano but couldn't bring herself to play, fear making her fingers stiff and uncooperative. The car ride to the dean's house was mostly silent. May stared out the window as familiar streets gave way to the university area, then to the historic neighborhood where the oldest and grandest homes stood. Her father attempted small talk about school and the upcoming winter break, but May's answers were short, her mind elsewhere. "Remember," her mother said as they turned onto the Dean Street, "Dr. Wu has a reputation for appreciating fine arts. This is an opportunity to make an impression." "I know, Mom," May said quietly. She had heard this reminder at least a dozen times in the past week. The dean's house came into view, a stately Victorian with large windows glowing warm against the early evening darkness. Cars lined the curb and May could see figures moving behind the front windows. Her stomach tightened. "Look at all these cars," her father commented, searching for a parking spot. "Seems like the whole university is here." "The dean's holiday party is the event of the season," her mother replied. "People talk about it for weeks afterward." Great, May thought. More pressure. They found parking 2 blocks away. As they walked back to the house, the cold air bit at May's cheeks, but she barely noticed. Each step brought her closer to the moment she dreaded. The front door was answered by Dean Wu himself, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and surprisingly kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a festive red sweater that softened his usual formal appearance. "Dr. Lin." "Dr. Lin?" He greeted her parents warmly. "So glad you could make it." His gaze fell on May. "And this must be your talented daughter. I've heard so much about your piano playing, young lady." "Thank you for inviting us," May's mother said, nudging May slightly. "Thank you," May echoed, clutching her music folder tighter. "Well, come in, come in. It's too cold to stand in doorways." The interior of the house was even more impressive than its exterior. High ceilings, ornate moldings, and walls lined with bookshelves gave it the feel of a small library. The entryway opened to a large living room already filled with people holding drinks and small plates of food, their conversations creating a steady hum. And there, in the corner by the bay window, sat the piano. It wasn't just any piano. It was a gleaming black grand, its lid propped open like a massive wing. It dominated the room, far more imposing than May's upright at home. "Beautiful instrument, isn't it?" the dean said, following her gaze. "It was my mother's. I don't play myself, never had the patience for it, but I couldn't bear to part with it after she passed. It mostly sits there looking pretty until occasions like this." He smiled at May. "I'm looking forward to hearing it properly played for once." May nodded wordlessly. "Let's get some food." "First," her father suggested, sensing her panic. They made their way through the crowd, her parents stopping every few steps to greet colleagues. May trailed behind, nodding politely when introduced but quickly forgotten as academic conversations took over. She kept one eye on the piano as if it might somehow disappear if she looked away. "Dr. Lin," a woman's voice rose above the crowd. "I was hoping to speak with you about the new research grant." May's mother turned, face lighting up at the opportunity to discuss work. "Dr. Patel?" "Yes, I've been meaning to catch up with you." "Go ahead," May's father said. "I'll show May where the food is." As her mother disappeared into a cluster of science faculty, May's father guided her toward a dining room where tables were laden with platters of food. The spread was impressive, much fancier than May had expected, with foods she didn't recognize alongside holiday standards. "Try to eat something," her father advised, handing her a small plate. "It might help with the nerves." May took the plate automatically but couldn't imagine swallowing a single bite. "When do you think they'll want me to play?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the party noise. Her father checked his watch. "Probably not for another hour at least. These things usually build up slowly." He squeezed her shoulder. "You have time." But time was the last thing May wanted. More time meant more worrying, more imagining everything that could go wrong. "May Lin," her mother appeared suddenly, with a stern-looking woman beside her. "This is Dr. Kennedy, head of the mathematics department. Her daughter also plays piano." "Oh?" Dr. Kennedy peered at May over her glasses. "What level are you?" May faltered. She had never thought of her playing in terms of levels. "She's been playing for 12 years, her mother interjected. "She won the regional youth competition last spring." Dr. Kennedy nodded approvingly. "My Sophia is preparing for her grade 8 exam. Perhaps you two should meet. She's around here somewhere." Before May could respond, she was being steered through the crowd again, her plate of untouched food abandoned somewhere along the way. Her mother's hand was firm on her back, propelling her forward as more introductions were made, more accomplishments recited. The room seemed to grow more crowded by the minute. The air felt thick and warm, heavy with perfume and the smell of food. May's dress suddenly felt too tight, the collar scratching against her neck. She tried to focus on her breathing, the way her piano teacher had taught her before recitals. In, out, slow and steady. "Ah, there you are." Dean Wu's voice cut through her thoughts. He was standing by the piano, tapping a spoon against a glass. The room gradually quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat tonight. Dr. Lin's daughter, May, has kindly agreed to play for us." All eyes turned toward her. May felt her face grow hot. Come, the dean beckoned. "The piano has been freshly tuned for the occasion." Her mother gave her a little push. "Go on." The walk to the piano felt endless. May was acutely aware of every step, every pair of eyes following her progress. The folder in her hand seemed suddenly heavy, her palms damp against the paper. The piano bench was higher than she was used to. As she sat down, adjusting her position, she could hear whispers in the crowd. "So young. Dr. Lin's daughter, you know. I heard she's quite accomplished." May's hands trembled as she opened her music folder and arranged the sheets, though she knew the piece by heart. It was a stalling tactic, a few precious seconds to compose herself. The room had fallen completely silent now. May stared at the keys, stark white and deep black against the polished wood, so similar to her piano at home, yet utterly foreign under the weight of expectation. She placed her fingers on the opening chord, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes came out stiff, mechanical. She could feel the tightness in her shoulders, the unnatural arch of her wrists. This wasn't how the nocturne was supposed to sound, delicate and flowing like water. Instead, it felt angular, each note separate and distinct rather than blending into the next. A small mistake in the third measure made her wince internally. No one else would notice, but to her it was glaring. She pushed forward, trying to recapture the feeling of the music, trying to forget the dozens of people watching her. From the corner of her eye, she could see her mother's face, expectant, proud, but with that hint of critical assessment that never quite disappeared. Nearby stood the dean, eyes closed, swaying slightly to the music. Others watched with polite interest or had already turned back to their conversations, the piano becoming pleasant background music to their evening. Halfway through the piece, May hit a wrong note, a real wrong note, one that didn't belong in the chord at all. The jarring sound seemed to echo in her ears. She faltered, nearly stopping before forcing herself to continue. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. She kept her eyes fixed on the keys, unable to look up, certain she would see disappointment on her mother's face. The beautiful melody that had once given her so much joy now felt like a burden, each note a potential mistake waiting to happen. As she approached the final section, something unexpected happened. A small child, perhaps 3 or 4 years old, wandered into her field of vision, stopping directly beside the piano. The little girl stared up at May with unabashed curiosity, apparently unaware that she was interrupting a performance. "You play pretty," the child said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. A ripple of gentle laughter broke the formal atmosphere. Someone, presumably the child's parent, whispered an apology and tried to usher the little girl away. But in that brief interruption, something shifted for May. The spell of anxiety cracked just slightly. The little girl's innocent comment, free from judgment or expectation, reminded her that music wasn't just about perfect performance. It was about creating something beautiful, something that could touch others. For the first time since she began playing, May looked up from the keys. She saw not critics but people enjoying a holiday party, people who weren't there to judge her but simply to listen, and maybe, just maybe, to feel something. The final phrases of the nocturne flowed from her fingers more naturally now. Not perfect, she was too nervous for perfect, but honest. Real. Hers. As the last notes faded into silence, there was a moment of stillness before applause broke out. May released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had survived. But as she stood to take an awkward bow, one thought kept circling in her mind. Was this really what music was supposed to feel like? This relief that it was over rather than joy that it had happened, and somewhere beneath that thought lay another quieter one. Could it ever feel different? The applause faded as May made her way back through the crowd. Several guests nodded approvingly as she passed, a few reaching out to pat her shoulder or murmur compliments. May smiled politely, though the words barely registered. All she could think about was finding a quiet corner to disappear into. Beautifully played, Dean Wu said, intercepting her before she could escape. Your parents must be very proud. Thank you, May replied automatically. She glanced around looking for her mother or father in the sea of faces. I especially enjoyed the Chopin, the dean continued. My late mother used to play that piece. Not nearly as well as you, I might add. He chuckled warmly. May nodded, unsure how to respond. The performance felt like a blur now. Fragments of notes and mistakes and that strange moment with the little girl. Dean Wu. A man in a bow tie approached, hand extended. Wonderful party as always. The dean turned away to greet the new arrival, and May seized her chance. She slipped between groups of chatting guests, making her way toward the hallway she'd spotted earlier. With any luck, she could find a bathroom or some other quiet space to collect herself. The hallway was blessedly empty. May leaned against the wall, closing her eyes and taking her first deep breath since she'd sat down at the piano. She had done it. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but she had made it through. Now she could enjoy the sweet relief of being finished, of obligation fulfilled. There you are. Her mother's voice cut through her moment of peace. May opened her eyes to see Dr. Lin approaching. A strange expression on her face, part pride, part something else May couldn't quite identify. Everyone is talking about your performance, her mother said, straightening May's collar unnecessarily. Dean Wu was very impressed. I made mistakes, May said quietly. That big one in the middle section. Her mother waved a dismissive hand. No one noticed but you. Dr. Patel asked if you've applied to the conservatory program at Eastman. I told her you're keeping your options open, but it's something to consider. May's heart sank. Another expectation. Another path being laid out for her. Mom, I don't want to study piano in college. The words came out before May could stop them, hanging in the air between them. Her mother's expression froze. Don't be ridiculous, she finally said. 12 years of lessons, competitions, recitals. Of course you'll continue in college. Maybe not as your main focus, but certainly as part of your education. But we'll discuss this later, her mother interrupted, glancing toward the party. This isn't the place. Go find your father. I think he was getting you something to drink. Without waiting for a response, her mother turned and walked back toward the main room, leaving May alone in the hallway once more. May sighed, pushing away from the wall. As she turned to follow her mother, she noticed a door slightly ajar at the end of the hall. Curious, she moved closer and peered inside. It was a small study, walls lined with bookshelves and a desk positioned near the window. Unlike the rest of the house, it seemed untouched by the holiday festivities, a quiet island in the sea of social chatter. Without really thinking about it, May slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The sounds of the party immediately muffled, replaced by a comforting silence. She wandered around the room, running her fingers along book spines and examining framed photographs on the desk. A soft knock startled her. Sorry, a voice said as the door cracked open. I didn't know anyone was in here. A boy about her age stood in the doorway looking equally surprised to find the room occupied. He was tall and lanky with dark curly hair and glasses that seemed slightly too big for his face. "I was just leaving," May said quickly, embarrassed to be caught snooping in the dean's private study. "No, stay," the boy said. "I was just looking for somewhere quiet. The party's a bit—" He made a vague gesture with his hand. "Overwhelming?" May suggested. He nodded, a smile appearing. "Exactly. I'm Theo, by the way. Dean Wu's son." "Oh." May felt her face flush. "I'm sorry for being in here. I didn't mean to intrude." Theo shrugged, stepping into the room and closing the door. "It's fine. Dad doesn't mind people using his study during parties. That's why he doesn't lock it." He dropped into a comfortable-looking armchair in the corner. "You're the piano player, right? I heard you from the kitchen. I was on appetizer duty." May nodded, still standing awkwardly by the desk. "You're really good," Theo said. "Like, seriously good." "Thanks," May replied, the familiar mix of pride and discomfort rising at the compliment. "But I made a bunch of mistakes." "Couldn't tell," Theo said. "But then again, I can barely play heart and soul with 2 fingers. So my standards are pretty low." He grinned, and May found herself smiling back despite her lingering nerves. "You can sit, you know," he added, nodding toward another chair. "Unless you really were leaving." May hesitated, then took the offered seat. Her mother would be looking for her soon, but right now, the thought of returning to the party felt exhausting. "So," Theo said, "do you actually like playing piano? Or is it one of those things parents force on their kids?" The question was so direct, so unexpected that May almost laughed. "That's complicated." "Sorry," Theo backtracked. "Too personal. My dad says I need to work on my social filter." "No, it's okay," May assured him. "I'm just not used to people asking that. Everyone usually assumes I love it because I've been doing it so long." "And do you?" "Love it, I mean." May considered the question. Did she love playing piano? She used to, she was certain. She remembered begging for lessons as a child. Remembered the thrill of mastering her first real piece, but somewhere along the way that joy had gotten buried under expectations and pressure and fear. "Sometimes," she finally answered, "when no one's listening." Theo nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Like how I only dance when the house is empty." This time May did laugh. "You dance?" "Terribly," Theo confirmed. But with great enthusiasm. They fell into an easy conversation after that. Theo told her about life as the dean's son. Less prestigious than you'd think. Mostly just means I have to wear a tie a lot. And May shared stories about growing up with professor parents. Dinner conversations about molecular structures and grading papers. It was the most relaxed May had felt all evening, maybe all week. There was something refreshing about talking to someone who had no expectations of her, who hadn't watched her performance with a critical eye or introduced her as Dr. Lin's talented daughter. "So what do you want to do?" Theo asked after a while. "If not piano?" May blinked. "What do you mean?" "In college or whatever. If you could choose anything." The question caught her off guard. What did she want? She'd been so focused on meeting her parents' expectations that she'd rarely considered her own desires. "I like science," she said slowly. "Not biochemistry like my mom. She'd want me to follow in her footsteps. But maybe something with stars, astronomy." She'd never said it out loud before. This secret interest she'd nurtured through library books and late-night documentaries. "That's cool," Theo said simply. No judgment, no surprise, just acceptance. A commotion outside the door interrupted their conversation. The party sounds grew louder, voices raised in what seemed to be an impromptu sing-along. "Sounds like the karaoke portion of the evening has begun," Theo said with a grimace. "Dad brings out the machine every year after people have had enough eggnog. It's both hilarious and horrifying." May smiled, trying to imagine the dignified faculty members she'd met earlier belting out pop songs. "We should probably go back," she said reluctantly. "My parents will wonder where I am." "Yeah." Theo stood, stretching. "But hey, at least you're done with your performance. Now you can just enjoy the party, could she?" The thought hadn't occurred to May. In her mind, the piano performance had been the entire point of the evening, the hurdle to overcome. She hadn't considered what came after. They stepped back into the hallway together. The singing was louder now, accompanied by laughter and the tinny backing track of what sounded like an 80s rock ballad. "That's Professor Richards from engineering," Theo said, identifying the current singer. As if on cue, a strained falsetto note rang out, followed by good-natured applause and laughter. May couldn't help but smile at the unexpected glimpse of her parents' colleagues letting loose. "May Lynn, there you are." Her father appeared around the corner looking relieved. "Your mother's been looking everywhere for you." "Sorry," May said. "I just needed a break from the crowd." Her father nodded, understanding, then noticed Theo. "Hello there." "This is Theo," May explained. "Dean Wu's son." "Nice to meet you, sir," Theo said politely. "Likewise," her father replied. "May, we should join the others. Dean Wu is about to make a toast." "I'll see you around," Theo said to May with a small wave. "Maybe later we can raid the dessert table. Dad always orders way too much cheesecake." May smiled. "I'd like that." As she followed her father back to the main room, May felt oddly lighter. The weight of the performance had lifted somewhat, and in its place was a new feeling, curiosity about what the rest of the evening might bring. The living room had transformed in her absence. The formal atmosphere had loosened considerably. Several people had removed suit jackets and kicked off uncomfortable shoes. A space had been cleared in the center where a few brave souls were attempting to dance to the karaoke music. In one corner, the karaoke machine was set up, with Dean Wu himself now taking the microphone to enthusiastic encouragement. "Ah, there's the young virtuoso," someone called as May entered the room. She turned to see an older woman raising a glass in her direction. "Encore, encore!" Others took up the call, and suddenly there were voices all around urging her to play again. May froze, the familiar panic beginning to rise. "She's already performed," her mother interjected, appearing at May's side. "One piece is enough for tonight." "Oh, but we'd love to hear something else," Dean Wu said, abandoning the karaoke microphone. "Perhaps something more festive? It is a holiday party after all." May looked between the dean's hopeful face and her mother's tight smile. She could feel the crowd's expectation pressing in on her once more. "I don't have any holiday music with me," she said apologetically. "Can't you play something from memory?" someone asked. "Or by ear?" "She specializes in classical repertoire," her mother answered before May could speak. "Chopin, Beethoven?" "But can actually," May interrupted, surprising herself. "I do know some other pieces." Her mother turned to her, eyebrows raised in question. Across the room, May caught Theo's eye. He gave her an encouraging thumbs up from where he stood by the dessert table. Next to him was the little girl who had spoken to May during her first performance, now happily devouring a large slice of cake. Something shifted inside May. A small spark of, what, rebellion? Independence? Or maybe just the simple desire to play something she actually enjoyed. "I could try," she heard herself saying, "if people really want to hear more." And before she could change her mind, she was walking back to the piano, aware of her mother's confused expression, but for once, not letting it stop her. As May settled onto the piano bench for the second time that evening, a strange calm washed over her. This time there was no sheet music to arrange, no proper posture to maintain. Just her, the piano, and a room full of people who surprisingly wanted to hear her play again. She placed her hands on the keys, hesitating. What should she play? Not Chopin or Beethoven or any of the classical pieces her mother would expect. Something different. Something that felt like her. From the corner of her eye, she saw Theo give her another encouraging nod. Near him, the little girl who had spoken to her earlier watched with wide-eyed interest, chocolate cake smeared around her mouth. Without overthinking it, May began to play. Her fingers found the opening chords of a pop song that had been all over the radio last summer, one she had worked out by ear during those rare practice sessions when her mother wasn't home. The melody was simple but catchy, the kind of tune that stuck in your head for days. A murmur of recognition rippled through the room. Someone near the back started humming along. May smiled to herself, adding little flourishes to the basic melody, bridging the chorus with runs that weren't in the original song but felt right under her fingers. As she played, she glanced up to find her mother's face in the crowd. Dr. Lin stood frozen, her expression a mixture of surprise and something that might have been disapproval, but May didn't stop. For once, she kept playing not for her mother's approval but for herself, and for the room full of people who were now swaying to the music she created. When she reached the end of the song, there was a beat of silence before the room erupted in applause, louder and more enthusiastic than after her classical piece. Dean Wu clapped his hands above his head and someone whistled from the back of the room. Another one, called a woman May recognized as the literature department chair. Yes, more, agreed the dean, raising his glass. I haven't heard my piano sound like that in years. May's heart raced, but not from anxiety this time. There was a different energy flowing through her, excitement maybe, or joy. She turned slightly on the bench to face the room more directly. Any requests? She asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Voices called out song titles, some current hits, some classics from decades past. May laughed, overwhelmed by the sudden barrage. Something we can sing to, suggested an older professor with a bushy white beard who May had met earlier. May thought for a moment, then began playing a holiday classic, not the formal, classical arrangement she'd learned for last year's winter recital, but a bouncy, jazzed-up version she'd heard on a movie soundtrack. She added a bluesy intro, letting her left hand create a walking bass line while her right hand danced over the melody. Within seconds, people were singing along. Voices blended together, some on key, some decidedly not, but all enthusiastic. The little girl with the chocolate cake twirled in circles, her party dress flaring out around her. When that song ended, May flowed right into another without pausing. This time a pop ballad that had been popular when her parents were in college. She'd heard her father humming it sometimes while he worked in his study. The older faculty members perked up, exchanging nostalgic glances as they recognized the tune. "Oh, I danced to this at my wedding," exclaimed a woman with silver-streaked hair, grabbing her husband's hand and pulling him into the center of the room. Other couples joined them, creating an impromptu dance floor in the middle of the dean's living room. May watched in amazement as the formal academic gathering transformed into something that looked more like a celebration. Because of her music. Because of something she was creating in this moment. She caught sight of Theo, who had made his way closer to the piano. He gave her a double thumbs up and mouthed, "This is awesome." For the next song, May chose a current hit that had been playing nonstop on every radio station. The younger people in the room, graduate students and faculty children, immediately perked up, some singing along with every word. One brave soul even attempted the dance that had gone viral with the song, prompting laughter and more people joining in. "Play that part again," someone called when May finished a particularly complicated bridge section. That was amazing. May obliged, this time embellishing it even further, adding runs and chord variations that made the simple pop song sound almost classical. The room went quiet as people stopped to listen, then erupted in applause when she finished the flourish with a dramatic glissando up the keyboard. She was having fun. Actually having fun playing the piano in front of people. The realization struck her like a physical sensation, a warmth spreading through her chest. This was nothing like the recitals and competitions her mother had entered her in, where every note was judged and scored. This was music as connection, as shared joy. As she transitioned into yet another song, May noticed Theo had been joined by a few other teenagers around their age, probably children of other faculty members. They were recording on their phones, bobbing their heads to the beat. "This is going on my story," one girl said, holding her phone higher to capture the scene. "Nobody's going to believe Professor Wu's holiday party actually got lit." May laughed at the comment, her fingers never missing a beat. She'd never been the center of attention like this before, at least not in a way that felt good. Usually, when people watched her play, she felt scrutinized, evaluated. But now, looking at the smiling faces and dancing figures around the room, she felt something entirely different, something like belonging. Her father had worked his way to the front of the crowd. Unlike her mother, whose expression had remained guarded, he was beaming with genuine pride. Not the measured academic pride he showed when she brought home perfect test scores, but something more personal and warm. When their eyes met, he gave her a wink that seemed to say, "I see you. The real you." May had lost track of how long she'd been playing. Her fingers moved from song to song, sometimes blending them together in unexpected ways. She mixed genres and eras, classical techniques with popular melodies, creating something that was uniquely her own. The little girl with the chocolate cake had made her way to the piano, and now stood beside May, watching her hands with fascination. "How do you know what buttons to push?" she asked during a quieter moment in the music. May smiled, not breaking her rhythm. "They're not buttons, they're keys. And I don't always know. Sometimes I just try and see what sounds good." He does this song every year. Wait for the high note, it's legendary. The child considered this, then pointed to a black key. What happens if you push that one? Let's find out, May said, incorporating the note into her next chord progression. The dissonance actually worked, creating a jazzy tension that resolved beautifully into the chorus. I helped, the little girl announced proudly to the room. You did, May agreed. Want to help some more? The child nodded eagerly, and May guided her small hand to press a key at just the right moment in the song. The delight on the girl's face when she heard her note blend into the music was priceless. Across the room, May spotted her mother engaged in conversation with Dean Wu. To her surprise, Dr. Lin wasn't watching her with disapproval anymore. Instead, she was gesturing toward the piano with what appeared to be, could it be pride? Not the stiff, achievement-oriented pride May was used to, but something more genuine. The dean said something that made her mother laugh. A real laugh, not her polite academic chuckle. Then he raised his glass toward May in a silent toast. Theo appeared at the side of the piano holding his phone. Mind if I make a request? He asked. Go ahead, May replied, fingers still moving. He showed her his screen, where he'd pulled up the chords to a song May recognized from a movie soundtrack, one of those epic piano pieces that sounded complicated but followed a simple pattern. Do you know this one? He asked. It's my favorite. May scanned the chord progression. I can figure it out, she said. She began slowly, following the basic structure on Theo's phone. But soon she was adding her own interpretation, building the dynamics, adding counter melodies, making the simple chords sound rich and complex. The room gradually quieted again as the music shifted from upbeat pop to something more emotive. When she finished, the silence held for a moment longer than before. Then Dean Wu stepped forward. I think I speak for everyone, he said, when I say that was the highlight of any holiday party I've ever hosted. He turned to May's mother. Dr. Lin, your daughter isn't just technically proficient, she's a true musician. The conservatory would be lucky to have her. May's mother nodded, but instead of launching into her usual speech about May's accomplishments, she simply said, she surprises us every day. The words, so different from her usual measured praise, made May's breath catch. Had her mother actually seen her tonight? Really seen her? As the applause died down, a graduate student approached the piano. Would you mind if I grab my guitar from my car? We could jam a bit if you're up for it. Before May could answer, another voice chimed in. I play drums. Well, kind of. I could use the dean's cookware if he doesn't mind. Dean Wu laughed. My kitchen is your kitchen. Just don't dent my good copper pots. And suddenly there was movement throughout the room. People volunteering instruments they had in their cars. Others offering to sing. Someone suggesting they could live stream the impromptu concert. The energy had completely transformed from the stiff, formal gathering May had dreaded into something vibrant and spontaneous. In the midst of the excitement, May felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up to find her mother standing beside the piano, an unreadable expression on her face. Mom, May began, ready to defend her departure from classical music. But Dr. Lin shook her head. I had no idea you could play like that, she said quietly. Without sheet music, without practice, May swallowed. Mrs. Wang has been teaching me to play by ear, and I practice other music sometimes, when you're not home. Instead of the disapproval May expected, her mother's expression softened further. You know, she said, I wanted to be a jazz pianist when I was your age. What? May couldn't hide her shock. But you always push classical music? Because that's what my parents pushed on me. Her mother's smile was tinged with something like regret. I thought I was giving you what I never had. Proper training, opportunities to perform. I didn't realize I was also giving you my parents' restrictions. Before May could respond, the graduate student returned, guitar in hand, and others were gathering around the piano with makeshift instruments. The moment between May and her mother passed, but something had shifted. A door had opened that had been closed for years. We should talk more about this, her mother said, squeezing May's shoulder gently. Later, May nodded, a lump forming in her throat. For now, Dr. Lin added, stepping back from the piano, why don't you show everyone what else you can do? The graduate student strummed an experimental chord on his guitar. Ready when you are, he said to May. What are we playing? May took a deep breath, looking around at the faces turned expectantly toward her. No longer judges, but fellow music makers. For the first time in years, she felt not the weight of expectation, but the lightness of possibility. "Let's try this," she said, and began to play. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of music, laughter, and unexpected connections. What had started as a formal faculty holiday party had transformed into something no one would soon forget, least of all May. The graduate student with the guitar turned out to be quite skilled, easily following May's lead as she moved through songs. They were soon joined by an economics professor, who revealed a hidden talent for beatboxing, and a physics postdoc who created impressive percussion using nothing but a set of wooden spoons and an empty punch bowl. May found herself at the center of this impromptu band, calling out chord changes and song suggestions, her fingers dancing across the keys with a freedom she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. The music they created together wasn't perfect, but it was alive in a way that her carefully rehearsed classical pieces never had been. "Hey, do you know this one?" Theo asked, showing May his phone with another song pulled up. He had stayed near the piano throughout the jam session, sometimes singing along, sometimes just watching with obvious admiration. May glanced at the song title and nodded. "I think so," she said, playing a few experimental chords. "Something like this?" "That's it." Theo grinned. "My dad loves this song." "Hey, Dad," he called across the room to Dean Wu. "This one's for you." The dean, who had been chatting with a group of faculty members, turned at his son's voice. His face lit up as he recognized the opening notes. "Oh, this takes me back," he said, making his way toward the piano. "Your mother and I danced to this at our wedding." As May played, the dean began to sing along, surprisingly well, his rich baritone filling the room. Others joined in on the chorus, voices blending in harmonies that somehow worked despite their lack of rehearsal. The little girl with the chocolate cake, whose name, May had learned, was Lily, had fallen asleep on a couch nearby, her mother gently stroking her hair. But many of the other children and teenagers at the party had gathered around the piano, some recording on their phones, others tentatively joining in when they knew the words. May caught sight of her father, arm around her mother's shoulders, both of them swaying slightly to the music. Her mother's earlier words echoed in her mind. "I wanted to be a jazz pianist when I was your age." It was hard to imagine her strict, achievement-focused mother harboring dreams of improvisational jazz. But the woman watching her now, with softened eyes and a gentle smile, seemed different from the Dr. Lin who had driven her to endless recitals and competitions. As the song ended, Dean Wu raised his glass again. "To unexpected talents," he said, nodding toward May, "and to the best holiday party in the history of the university." The room echoed with agreement and applause. The graduate student with the guitar leaned toward May. "We should start a band," he joked, but his eyes were serious. "You're incredible on keys." Before May could respond, she felt a tap on her shoulder. It was her father, looking at his watch. "It's getting late," he said apologetically. "We should probably head home soon." May's heart sank. She wasn't ready for this night to end. Wasn't ready to step away from this piano and the magic that had happened here. For the first time, she understood what her teachers had meant when they talked about music being a conversation, a connection between player and listener. She had finally experienced it herself. "One more song?" she asked, not just to her father but to the room. "Make it a good one," someone called back. May took a deep breath, considering. What could possibly sum up everything she was feeling right now? The gratitude, the joy, the sense of having discovered something profound about herself and her relationship with music. She began to play softly, a melody she'd composed herself during those private practice sessions when her mother wasn't home. It wasn't complete, just a fragment she'd been working on for months, adding to bit by bit whenever inspiration struck. She'd never played it for anyone before. The room quieted as people recognized this wasn't a familiar tune. The graduate student with the guitar lowered his instrument, listening. Even Theo, who had been providing song suggestions throughout the evening, stood silently, head tilted slightly as he took in the new melody. May closed her eyes, letting her fingers find their way through the piece. It had elements of classical training, arpeggios that flowed like water, chord progressions that Bach might have approved of, but also jazz-influenced dissonances and pop-inspired rhythms. It was, she realized as she played, a perfect reflection of herself, Not just the pianist her mother had trained, but the musician she was becoming on her own. When she reached the end of what she'd composed so far, she opened her eyes to find the room utterly silent. For a heartbeat, she worried she'd made a mistake in sharing something so personal. Then Dean Wu spoke. "What's that piece called?" he asked quietly. May hesitated. "It doesn't have a name yet," she admitted. "I'm still working on it." "You wrote that?" her mother asked, stepping forward. There was no disapproval in her voice, only wonder. May nodded, suddenly shy. "It's not finished." "It's beautiful," her father said. "Indeed," agreed the dean, "absolutely beautiful." He turned to address the room. "I think we've all been privileged tonight to witness something special. Not just talent, but passion. True musicianship." As people began gathering coats and saying goodbyes, many stopped by the piano to thank May personally. The economics professor with the beatboxing skills handed her a business card. "My daughter is learning piano," he explained. "She hates practicing. Would you ever consider tutoring? I think you might inspire her in a way her current teacher doesn't." The graduate student with the guitar exchanged phone numbers with her, promising to send her some of his original compositions. "Maybe you could help me work out the piano parts," he suggested. Even Dr. Kennedy, the stern mathematics department head, who had initially intimidated May, approached with warm praise. "My Sophia would love to meet you," she said. "She struggles with her classical pieces, too. Perhaps you could show her there's more than one way to be a pianist." As the crowd thinned, Theo helped May gather her sheet music, the classical pieces she had brought but never used. "So," he said casually, "there's a winter concert at my school next month. Nothing fancy, just students performing whatever they want. I'm reading a poem I wrote." He glanced at her. "They always need musicians. You interested?" May smiled. "Maybe," she said. "I'd have to ask my parents." "Ask us what?" Her mother appeared beside them, coat draped over her arm. May explained about the school concert, watching her mother's face carefully for signs of disapproval. "A high school talent show?" Dr. Lin said thoughtfully. Not exactly May's usual venue. May's heart sank. But then her mother continued, surprising her. "But I think it could be good experience, different from her normal performances." She looked directly at May. "Would you play your own composition? The one you just shared with us?" May stared at her mother, hardly believing what she was hearing. "You'd let me play that? Instead of classical?" Her mother's expression was complicated, a mixture of emotions May couldn't quite read. "I think," she said slowly, "that it's time I stopped deciding what you play. At least sometimes." She glanced around the room at the lingering guests still buzzing about the unexpected musical evening. "Tonight made me realize I've been, perhaps too rigid." May felt a lump form in her throat. "Mom, we'll talk more at home," her mother said, but her tone wasn't dismissive or stern. It was thoughtful, even gentle. "I think we have a lot to discuss about your music." As they said their final goodbyes to Dean Wu and Theo, the dean clasped May's hand warmly. "You've given us a wonderful gift tonight," he said. "I hope you know that." The night air was crisp and cold as they walked to their car, their breath forming small clouds in front of them. Stars dotted the clear sky above, reminding May of her secret interest in astronomy. Somehow, after tonight, that dream didn't seem so impossible anymore. "Your mother used to play like that," her father said quietly as they walked, falling into step beside May while her mother walked slightly ahead. Not exactly the same style, but with that same freedom. "When we first met in college, she would play in the student lounge sometimes. Jazz standards mostly." May glanced at her father in surprise. "What happened?" He shrugged. "Life, expectations. Her parents wanted her to focus on academics, not music." "Sound familiar?" He smiled sadly. "By the time we were in graduate school, she had stopped playing altogether. Said she didn't have time." May looked ahead at her mother's straight back, her measured steps. How had she never known this about her? How much else didn't she know? The drive home was quiet but not uncomfortable. May sat in the back seat, watching the streetlights flicker past, replaying moments from the evening in her mind. The terrified girl who had walked into the dean's house just hours ago felt like a different person entirely from the one sitting in this car now. As they pulled into their driveway, her mother broke the silence. "Would you play for us sometimes? At home, your music, I mean, not the assigned pieces." The question hung in the air, fragile and important. "I'd like that," May said softly. Inside, the house was dark and still. May headed straight for the stairs, exhausted but in the best possible way. Her mother caught her arm gently before she could go up. "May," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Not just for your technical skills or how many hours you practice. I'm proud of who you are as a musician. As a person." May felt tears prick her eyes. How long had she waited to hear those words? Not praise for winning a competition or mastering a difficult piece, but acknowledgement of herself, her own musical voice. "Thanks, Mom," she managed to say. Her mother nodded, then added, "We'll talk tomorrow about your practice schedule. I think perhaps we could make some adjustments, allow some time for your own compositions." It wasn't a complete transformation. May knew her mother well enough to understand that 12 years of expectations wouldn't disappear overnight. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall that had grown between them. Later in her room, May sat on the edge of her bed and looked at the piano in the corner. Instead of seeing it as a duty or a burden for the first time in years, she felt drawn to it, excited by the possibilities it held. She remembered the faces in the dean's living room, the way people had gathered around to listen and join in. She thought of Theo's invitation and the graduate student's suggestion about starting a band. She thought about her own composition and all the other melodies waiting inside her, yet to be discovered. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the message made it clear who it was from. "Thanks for making my dad's boring party the best one ever. Your music was amazing." Theo attached was a short video clip. May at the piano, eyes closed, playing with complete absorption as the room around her swayed to the music she created. She looked happy, really happy. Another text came through. "Dad says you're officially invited to all future parties. Bring your sheet music, or don't. Your choice." May smiled, setting her phone on the nightstand. She slipped off her shoes and padded across to the piano. Even though it was late, she felt drawn to the keys, wanting to capture the feeling of this night before it faded. As her fingers touched the cool ivory, she began to play softly, not Chopin or Beethoven or any of the classical masters, but the continuation of her own composition, the piece that had until tonight existed only in private moments. This time, she didn't worry about who might be listening or judging. She simply played, letting the music flow from somewhere deep inside her, a place that had been waiting all along to be heard.